Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. How's everyone doing out there today? Thank
Woo.
God it's Friday.
Yes, Friday, Marek. What happens on Friday, Marek?
Oh man, on Friday, it's another edition of the CareSouth Carolina Community Live Podcast. And I
What?
am one of your hosts, Mark Calhoun. I'm Director of Social and Community Services for CareSouth Carolina with my partner in crime.
I'm Daniel Myers. I'm the MATHD Program Director for Care South Carolina. Also the RCORP Consortium Director. Just glad to be here again on a Friday, man. I mean, this is my baby. This is my baby that we're going to discuss today. I'm just excited about this whole podcast, man.
I know it. I know it. I know it, my brother. This is your forte.
Yes.
So I'm gonna let you have the floor. And you can introduce the guests, or you can allow them to introduce themselves. But I'm gonna let you have the floor. Let you run with it, bro.
All right, all right. Hey, look, this is an honor for me to have these two great people with us this morning. We got. I'm not going to tell. You know what? I'm going to let y'all introduce yourself, and then when y'all hear these people and hear where they're from and what they do, y'all gonna be just excited as I am because we're going to get some good information today. So we're going to start with Miss Sara.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, Marek. I'm Sara Goldsby. I am the director of the South Carolina Department of Alcohol and Other Drug Abuse Services. And I'm a public health social worker. And I just want to say I love South Carolina and what y'all do. Just amazing work in South Carolina. I also have the honor of being the co-chair of the state's opioid emergency response team. And look at this issue day in and day out with team members, not only at DAODAS, but across state agencies and local jurisdictions as we continue to monitor the issue.
Wow, wow. Major O'Neill.
I'm Frank O'Neill, and I've been with the State Law Enforcement Division for 30 years. I've been in law enforcement for 42 years. I've been involved in narcotic enforcement since 1985, so I've seen the ebb and flow of opinions by people on drug use and everything from drug legalization to what we're dealing with today, and it's the opioid crisis. So, you know, I've seen this the drug issue again from the early 80s to where it is now, and it's very disturbing, and I'm glad to have an opportunity to speak about it today with Sara.
Wow. So we're going to get a plethora of information, a wealth of knowledge today, and we're going to be informed and we're going to do better because our main goal is prevention, treatment, and recovery and keeping our communities and our families safe. So, you know, we're going to discuss a couple of things today. We're going to discuss the counterfeit drugs that's hitting our streets. We're going to discuss the pill press. We're going to discuss a whole bunch of things. Marijuana legalization. We're going to discuss a whole bunch of things. I know we're going to have a bunch of questions. So please, if you got questions, go ahead and post them, and we'll make sure that we try to get answers for you during the podcast or shortly after. We try to get the information to you. But we're going to start the conversation with talking about how our streets are now being flooded with the counterfeit pills. And if you don't mind, panelists, if you don't mind talking about discussing what you were seeing and just how all this stuff just came to be and what can we do about it?
I'm sorry, are you asking me or Sara?
Either one of y'all can just double team this thing. I think
Frank, jump in with what you're seeing, and then I'll follow up with the impact that we've got with.
Okay, so I'll speak a little to you about what I see on the street. You know, I've got a unit of about 30, a little more than 30 agents, and what we're seeing is an overwhelming supply of narcotics, and we're seeing, you know, in the last 10 years, just an increase in opioids, and you know, where we used to have heroin, now we're seeing, like you're talking about, synthetic opioids. Our lab submissions in our lab over the last 7 to 8 years, we've seen 14 different analogs of fentanyl. Fentanyl analogs. So they'll change the recipe from time to time. And I worked strategically across the state in my early years in the 90s and early 2000s on heroin, which we had an overwhelming supply of then. And the heroin that we were dealing with is nothing like the synthetic opioids that we're dealing with now. When we're talking about fentanyl and carfentanil, which are 10 to 100 times more powerful. And so because of that, you're seeing an increase in deaths. And we've had, our lab has seen a 159% increase in opioid deaths from fentanyl. Again, we probably would not be having this conversation if those synthetic opioids had not come into play, replacing heroin. As we spoke earlier, again, some of these people that are addicted to these drugs have no idea what they're ingesting. Some do, and some long-term addicts, even we have seen them even have somebody standing by with Naloxone to revive them, knowing that they are going to get some fentanyl. They ask for it. So again, with teens nowadays, we're seeing fentanyl being used in pill presses, disguised as other drugs, maybe disguised as a benzodiazepine. Somebody may drink beer, may use marijuana, and then somebody also gives them a pill that they think is something that's going to heighten the high that they already have, and they get fentanyl, and next thing you know, they overdose and or die. So we're seeing a huge problem, and again, that's coming from an overwhelming supply, and I can go into that later. I'll let Sara go ahead and talk a little bit about what she's seeing statistically or whatever else she wants to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I think Frank really painted the picture, but I just, wanted to go back for everybody's benefit to where this all started, really in the 1990s with the overprescription of illicit, prescribed FDA pharmaceuticals to treat pain, the overprescription of those medications that we knew were addictive at the time. We saw that wave, through the late 90s and early 2000s really impact, and a lot of people become dependent and then, develop substance use disorder with those prescription drugs. That second wave then, right, when we started really getting a handle on prescribing in the late 2000s, around the 2013, 2014, 2012 area, people transitioned to heroin, the supply of heroin. I think that wave has happened. And now, what Frank described is we're seeing the synthetic opioids come into the United States, become more available. And like he said, many, many different analogs of fentanyl. And fentanyl is really what we're seeing now in the illicit supply chain that's having the greatest impact on overdoses and overdose deaths. I think in the last year or two, we've really seen maybe the biggest impact in the United States related to overdoses because of these extremely potent substances. And I like to say it's not just South Carolina, but it's the entire nation. And I think before this illicit supply chain really was making an impact, we had some confidence that the work we were doing to address the opioid crisis, so many people really hands-on with the issue in a number of different strategies, we were having an effect and we were getting a handle on things. And I like to point out that, from 2018 to 2019, deaths related to opioids in South Carolina increased by only 3%. And that's well below the 10% that the nation saw 2018 to 2019. But in 2020, when we started seeing all of the presence of these substances, the mortality data isn't finalized, but we're going to learn that we saw a 50% increase in deaths related to opioids in 2020. And we estimate, over 60% of those deaths are related directly to these synthetic fentanyl analogs, these illicit fentanyl drugs. So just, huge tragedy and huge loss related to these substances for families and communities across our state.
So, and we're going to continue talking about this, but how much was it COVID was an influence in this increase in everything? Was that any contributing factors at all? There was COVID a contributing factor to the increase of this drug being brought in, and also the inception of it, taking it. What y'all think?
I mean, I could quickly speak to, the COVID impact on people seeking substances. I think it was just, two factors, like a perfect storm of supply and, just what people have been experiencing with COVID-19 in terms of isolation, social and environmental stressors, economic stressors, all of these things that have put a lot of pressure and negative feelings into people's lives because of the situation. Those are the types of things that usually people turn turn to alcohol and drugs to escape from. You know, alcohol, you know this, Daniel. I mean, the folks that you work with every day, many of the folks who have substance use disorders started that misuse to not feel bad or to feel good. And that's really, you know, just a coping mechanism and a way that people use substances to try to alleviate, you know, something deeper. And so I think it's just a mix of a couple of bad things that happened over the last couple of years.
Right.
Daniel, I will tell you too, and Sarah has heard me talk about this in the past, but from a law enforcement perspective, we have to continue to cut the supply. To me, the supply is the most important issue, and people, you know, talk about you know, demand comes first, and I do not believe that demand comes first. There was no demand for crack cocaine before, you know, dealers out in California learned how to cook it into base. There was no demand for meth until somebody created meth. Motorcycle gangs out in California with the help of chemists. And then there was an overwhelming supply of that. And again, Sarah alluded to it earlier, when the, you know, the RX industry irresponsibly, I guess, marketed, you know, pills and opioids, and you know, and then we've seen that decrease because DEA cut the supply, and then we had education and we had more responsible prescribing by doctors because of education. And now here you got an increase in heroin and fentanyl deaths, followed by overwhelming supply from countries like Mexico and China. So that's what we want to continue working on. And as I hear, and they try to use it with the word harm reduction, and I don't think they're one and the same. But when you start to legalize drugs, you know, perception of harm goes down for kids. There is a demand, but you know, when you have an overwhelming supply coming into people that are addicted, you know, we can people in Sarah and in your area of responsibility, you guys can save a lot of people through treatment. But if they're replaced with more and more people because they're getting overwhelming supply of drugs, we're basically sticking our finger in the dike, and that's not where we want to be. Right. We want to be more aggressive in stopping it before we're sticking our finger in the dike, basically.
Yeah, Daniel, if maybe we can like drill down on that a little bit, because Frank said something that was really important, and that's perception of harm.
That's it.
And I think everything that we're seeing now with these counterfeit, illicit, highly potent fentanyl pills, it strikes at that notion of perception of harm. You know, back in the 90s, early 2000s, even, you know, 10 years ago or so, you know, we had this sort of social norm of, if you're in pain or you're not feeling well, there's a pill to fix it. And this push that you should not experience pain. And so, you know, we saw the overprescribing, but the thing that happened was when folks were prescribed medications to alleviate physical pain, when they were in any kind of emotional or psychological pain, they found that those pills alleviated their emotional and psychological pain. You know, just the way, you know, alcohol can numb feelings and other drugs can numb feelings. Well, there's still, you know, we're still, you know, working on that awareness and education about the perception of harm. And that's why I think, you know, this podcast even is just so important, because everyone needs to understand that absolutely nothing is safe unless you got it from your doctor and from the pharmacy. And we can't any longer have a norm that, you know, if you're at your family's house over, you know, Thanksgiving break, are you still there, Daniel? Have you got me?
Yeah. You're breaking up a little bit, but I can still hear you.
Okay. You know, I think we have to continue to remember that getting rid of unused prescription drugs is extremely important. We have to empty out the medicine cabinet. We have to empty out the kitchen cabinet. Can't save those things for a rainy day. But also, you know, if you're out to lunch with your girlfriends or, you know, anybody from family or friends, you should never be offering a prescription looking pill or taking anything that isn't prescribed to you specifically, because you don't know what you're getting. And anything could be just extremely deadly and dangerous if you don't know that it's for you.
Well, and you're talking about perception of harm. Okay, at 16, 17 years old, I'm not afraid of anything. Everything is safe. Nothing is dangerous to me. And so giving them the opportunity to legalize a drug that's causing harm already, that's causing so much harm already, it can't be harm reduction. To me, it's an increase in harm because we removed the safety feature of having that law there to protect them at that vulnerable age. And like we talked earlier, the brain is not even mature until, late to mid 20s. And so allowing them to have these drugs, even the new bill that's being passed right now with the lowering the alcohol, legalizing alcohol to 18 years old. At 18 years old, I cannot handle alcohol, and so there's a whole bunch of things that's happening right now that's really making us pedal backwards with what we're doing as far as prevention and treatment. It's increasing we have to increase our efforts to educate people more, to get people like you guys out in the public saying, talking about these dangers that we have and these risks that we're taking. But at the same time, informing people, like you said, whenever I was in nursing school, they gave us a new vital sign. Before it was a blood pressure, temp, respirations. Now all of a sudden, pain is a vital sign. And so everybody had to have their pain level met whenever they came in. And over time, people started to learn that if I tell you that I'm a 10, I can get something. And now we developed a culture of addiction because people started using the medication for not its intended purpose. They use it for everything. And so once you start using something outside of the intended purpose, then you have opened up the door for the physiology of addiction. And so having people informed more education around drug use, around taking drugs, around licits and illicits, letting people know that there's a danger in sharing pills. There's a danger in sharing your medications with somebody. That's a big thing. When I was growing up, it was nothing for my aunts and uncles to sit around and say, the doctor told me I had gout, and what does gout feel like? They start, I got the same thing. Well, I just give you half of my pills and then we'll take care of that. That was common practice. But you can't do that now because no two pills are the same. And we don't know where they come from. Even though somebody presented to you with a prescription bottle, we don't know if they fill that bottle with something that they got off the streets. And so we cannot just take it for granted that every pill is a safe pill. And today, this education that we're having today and informing people of the dangers behind these drugs and these lookalike licits is destroying us. Now, we're going to really have to beef up our efforts at CareSouth and our MAT program to educate the people that's already in treatment that you can't go out and take this even though it looks the part. You can't do it. You need to have better research and consult with your physician.
Hey, can I jump in real quick? If you could kind of build on what Major O'Neill and Ms. Goldsby was speaking about. I did not realize until, Daniel, me and you sat down and talked, and you kind of impressed on me how dangerous fentanyl and carfentanyl was. I had no clue. We talked before going on to the podcast about mine and yours prior law enforcement experience. But when I left the game and left the profession, crack was still prevalent. Mm-hmm. So they even, I don't even hear anything about crack anymore. So could y'all talk about the dangers and how dangerous those two drugs are, fentanyl and carfentanyl? Just kind of impress upon the people how dangerous they are. Kind of give us an idea.
Frank, do you want to jump in with the substance and then I'll talk about, some of these pills? Okay.
So from a business sense, if you're a drug dealer, you can buy 10 grams of fentanyl for about $1,000, and that can produce the equivalent of 1 kilo of what heroin would be. So you've got a profit margin of about 100. Well, you're going to make about $150,000 off of that 10 grams that you bought for $1,000 when you're talking about fentanyl and the strength it is compared to regular heroin. So, people, drug dealers are going to that. The other thing they don't have to worry about when you're talking about synthetic drug production, you don't have to worry about harvesting a natural product, again, because you're not having to rely on weather and things like rain and soil and things like that. You just have to have the formula to make this stuff and some of the other chemicals to make it. So more and more drug dealers are going to that. I mean, we have a big parcel interdiction group, and we're trying to expand that now. But when you see the amounts that we're getting in, that one I talked to you about in Florence, a prime example. If that gets on the street, those amounts, I mean, you're talking killing thousands. It could kill thousands of people because there's not much room for error when you're the chemist or you're the guy mixing this stuff. These guys are not chemists. They're not doctors. And so you're talking about something the size of a pen, the tip of a pen or needle that can make the difference between life and death. And if you don't put enough other filler substances to mix with that, somebody's going to die or overdose.
Yeah, and I think that's the message to everyone right now, especially kids or, our young people who are interested in experimenting with drugs, because, the DEA has this campaign right now that we're picking up on and pushing, and that is one fake pill can kill. It's just one pill. It'll kill you with the potency of that substance. And, you want to say, we keep saying opioids, but, these are being made to look like real prescription medications, things that look exactly like an FDA approved and pharmacy dispensed Oxycontin or Percocet or hydrocodone. And I think we even recently saw some Xanax that, was just really this fake fentanyl, right? So a lot of people take Xanax for their anxiety. They're prescribed that for their anxiety. But if they're getting this from the illicit market or, out of somebody's pocketbook or from somebody's, car, and it's not their prescription, this could be the fentanyl, the one pill that kills. We've also seen, and maybe Frank can speak to this, we've seen some stimulants as well. Illicit pills that look like Adderall, right? Adderall is a prescription prescribed to many folks to treat attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. But these illicitly made Adderall that look like the real thing are actually amphetamines and illicit methamphetamine. And so I think the messaging here is really that, you don't know what you're getting unless it's prescribed to you. And these things can be absolutely deadly. And I think that's the message we've got to get, especially to our young folks, young adults right now, who may be interested in experimenting or trying a drug that hasn't been prescribed to them.
And to add on to that, so some of these are just people that really don't know what they're doing when they mix these drugs. Some of it is financially strategic. We know that some drug dealers are adding methamphetamine to fentanyl and heroin for several reasons, because it helps them come down off of their when they're getting sick from not having heroin, but it also it gives them another addiction problem that they're going to have with meth, and again, it's high potency meth, and I can tell you from a health standpoint, meth destroys the body quicker than anything I've ever seen. Fentanyl can kill you just like that, but meth just destroys the body because of the chemicals they use. But again, they're mixing fentanyl and methamphetamine, and I can't tell you the worst combination out there. But those are just some of the things we're going. And some of it is out of ignorance that they do it, and some of it is financially strategic by the drug dealers.
And I don't know if you can discuss this or not, Major, but what about where is this fentanyl coming? Where is it coming from, and how is it getting here, and how has it been produced? Is it being produced in the United States? Where's fentanyl coming from? Well,
the majority is coming in from out of the country, primarily China. We have intelligence that chemists have gone to Mexico and are making it there as well. And I don't want to get off the subject, but while we have been hard at work on the opioid problem. They've stockpiled meth over there as well. But to get back to your, we're seeing most of ours come through traditional parcel services, FedEx, the postal service. Postal service is the largest. I guess I'm say violator. I call them sometimes the biggest drug dealer in America. They do not have a lot of money financially to really do interdiction like they should. But again, you hear all the time about how financially strapped they are and where that agency is. But, again, UPS, FedEx, we do regular interdiction with those, and we find those drugs every week. And again, we have chemists here in our own country, and again, just getting the right chemicals, but most of those chemicals come from China and Mexico. So, that's one of our concentrations and strategies is to fight the from the interdiction side.
So we understand. Go ahead, Marek. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was just going to say, wow. I had no idea it was coming in that way. You see all the stories, traditionally about the drugs crossing the border that way, but to be able to using normal everyday delivery processes to get that drug into here, wow.
Well, I will tell you, and again, I spoke at an event with Sara several months ago, and this is not a political statement, but we have to secure our borders because the drugs. I mean, when you give some of the people that are coming across the border, illegals, you give them a knapsack full of fentanyl or full of meth, and give them $100 or $500. You know how many people would jump at that opportunity to get across into our country illegally, and when bringing that is financially, I mean, it's a financial boom to the big drug dealers, but even to a person who's just trying to get across the border for a better life. We have to close our borders. It has not helped us at all. It has been just a nightmare for our border people trying to shut that down.
So as far as our treatment strategies for this, what can we do? How can we be more vigilant? What can we do different than what we're doing now to help our citizens and our family members? We lose. I mean, I know for a fact right here in my little community in the last year, we lost about 10 to 12 people to overdose, and every single one was fentanyl related. Yeah. So what can we do as far as our treatment and our treatment and our education prevention part? What can we do better here at CareSouth?
Yeah, Danielle, it's a great question. And, just related to these illicit, just the blue pills alone that we have seen in the state, we've, had over 300 overdoses in the state so far in 2021 with those blue pills. So it's impacting a lot of families everywhere. I think number one is we've got to have these conversations, right? Starting early with our young family members and kids, that no pill is safe unless it's given to you by a nurse, doctor, mom, or dad, and from the pharmacy, right? So no room for experimentation at all anymore because one pill can kill. So having that conversation early and having the conversation with, our friends and family members who we know may be misusing substances. Every opportunity for intervention should be taken. And I think when it comes to CareSouth and all that you guys do, having one-on-one contact with so many folks in the area from a healthcare perspective, a screening doesn't take long, but we should be screening everybody. Having a brief intervention when we see that we need to, and in some cases referring to specialty substance use services when we know that it's appropriate. I think you guys have done an amazing job in your part of the state to make evidence-based opioid use disorder treatment available. I just want to thank you all for the hard work you've done to build the capacity to make those services available to the community. Connection is everything. Connection to those services is key, and keeping folks engaged in those services. And then I think, we can't forget about Naloxone. Naloxone is effective at reversing an overdose that involves opioids, fentanyl, heroin, any of those things that are deadly. I think having the awareness of where naloxone can be obtained, and that can be done online at justplainkillers.com. I think you guys are community distributors of naloxone, making sure that folks who are at risk of overdose have access to that. Anybody who, may have a high dose prescription of opioids that, even if it's licit, our seniors that have a lot of opioids that are prescribed appropriately for pain may be at risk if they mix up their medications. But then certainly the folks that we know are misusing illicit opioids, we need to have that naloxone available in case of an overdose. It's going to keep them breathing, it's going to keep them alive, and it's going to give them an opportunity to live and get connected to treatment and find a life in recovery. So those are the keys. We've just got to be aware, connect to services, have these conversations, and have naloxone available. There's one more strategy that I think is really important, and it's an intervention strategy. But there are some folks who are dependent, who have, an opioid use disorder or another substance use disorder. They may be ambivalent or uncertain yet about engaging in treatment and finding recovery. So we know that they are going to be using substances, right? Having another tool for them to identify the presence of fentanyl in the substance that they are going to use is important. And that's with fentanyl test strips that have been shown to, make the presence of fentanyl known to that substance user so that they can make an informed decision about how they're going to change their use. It's known to keep people alive. And so it's just one more tool, because the key right now is preventing overdose, keeping folks alive so we can get them into recovery.
That's right. And, there was a marriage made in heaven a few years ago whenever CareSouth got with DAODAS, and we partnered together in this fight against opiate use disorders and addiction. And without the help from you guys, we wouldn't be as successful as we are. So having partners like you that have the same passion that we have to save lives and to get people into recovery and into treatment makes this even better. Currently, CareSouth has over close to 600 patients actively in treatment right now. And we have 21 providers that are waivered to offer those services. So our access is wide open. And we're trying to increase that every time we get a provider in. We're trying to increase that opportunity for access so we can have unlimited resources for treatment. And having partnered with you guys, with Alpha Center, Rubicon, and Trinity in our service area makes this very, very, very successful for us. And we couldn't do it without you. And so we're going to continue our fight. We're going to continue having conversations like this around addiction, around prevention, around treatment services, and the risk that we're taking when we are legalizing or attempting to legalize things that are already causing harm in our society. And before we go, if Major O'Neill can really give me his idea, his thoughts on decriminalizing drugs or like marijuana and changing the drinking age. If he can just give me his output on that, I would really, really appreciate that.
All right. Well, I'll start off. Sarah knows I could go on and on, but I'll just talk first of all about decriminalization, and I'll get to marijuana in just a minute. But when you do decriminalize any drug, your perception of harm goes up, especially with children. We're seeing this out west where they have decriminalized in Oregon. They've decriminalized methamphetamine, cocaine, heroin. Things like that. And to me, it's just, it's absolutely insane. We reduced drug use in this country for almost 40 years, and there was a lot of things we did. But perception of harm was one of those things that, decreased over that time. Began because of education, because of enforcement. When you decriminalize something, and sometimes I have a disagreement with people in your field, but when you decriminalize something, 90% of people, I think you'll agree, will not seek treatment unless there's a hammer hanging over them. And that hammer is criminalization a lot of times. Drug courts is what I'm talking about. when you can hold somebody accountable, say you, and I'll tell you from a law enforcement perspective, I'm not interested in users. They're people that are sick and they're people that need help, but you have to have something to hold over their head. And if you don't have that hammer, a lot of times they're going to keep on using. So I think we need money for drug courts, and you don't hear many. You're starting to hear more people in law enforcement that are okay with that. But we need more money for drug courts, true drug courts, where you hold people responsible, and they have to do certain. They have to reach certain criteria to get rid of that charge that they have on them. And again, we have no problem. We're after the people that are trafficking these drugs, that are bringing these drugs in. And so the last thing I'll just say about marijuana, there's a movement, and again, it's a strategy. The marijuana movement's one and the same. They're about CBD, they're about hemp, they're about all the same culture. And right now we have two bills, 3351 in the House and Senate Bill 150 in the Senate. The Senate bill is the one that's got the most traction. But this makes marijuana more available than alcohol and cigarettes for younger people, because an 18-year-old would be allowed to use it. When you're talking, and we spoke before, the concentration of this drug and what it leads up to, it is truly an introduction to these other drugs, because it puts you in a more risky environment. And this is coming from people that I've arrested, people I've talked to, people in my own family. And so as you talk about going to the next drug, this drug is as powerful as it's ever been. You're talking about a drug that is not going to be regulated by the FDA. It's not going to be prescribed by a physician and not dispensed by a legitimate pharmacy. That's what this bill is. And vaping is in this bill. Again, they try to make it sound good, saying it was the most conservative bill in the country, but it's not even close, because it allows vaping. And that, as you know, is the number one method of use by our teens and young people. So again, I think we need to preach more abstinence, like we always have. I know there's a place for harm reduction and MAT, and I agree with that in certain situations. But I still think that we do not need to let bills bypass the FDA, even though we've had problems with the FDA, and we saw that with the pill problem being irresponsibly marketed. But this bill is just so dangerous, and again, it's going to lead to a further problem. And it's just a step in the process to make it legal recreationally. So that's where law enforcement is. I don't speak for everybody in law enforcement, but I think I speak for the majority.
Wonderful. And I agree with you. Abstinence should be our main conversation. That's very good part of prevention. And like Sara said, thank God for the law being passed for our physicians to prescribe a life-saving measure for every controlled substance that can cause respiratory depression that's put out there. And Narcan is that life-saving measure that we choose here at CareSouth, that every provider write a prescription for every, for that drug or for that class of drugs that they write that can lead to overdose. And holding them accountable as well, holding the providers accountable for their prescriptions, and also holding our patients accountable is very important to us ending this epidemic. And having people like you guys on the forefront and on the front lines, educating us and having these meetings and talking, having discussion, keeping this discussion alive and not letting it die out is very important. As long as we keep it in our face and we see what's going on in the news and in our environment, then that pushes us and urges us to continue this fight to make sure that we get everybody into treatment and that we can get everybody into sobriety. And, and that's what I'm working. That's my passion. That's what I'm working for. And I love what I'm doing, and I can tell that you all have passions for what you're doing. And so us partnering together, we can make this thing awesome. We can really do some things. So
yeah, Daniel, I've got to brag on South Carolina for just a minute and say thank you. You have, as a healthcare organization, been an absolute leader in South Carolina. And I want to thank Ann Lewis for really pushing, the implementation of substance use disorder services, because it's the right thing to do. And as you said, you're treating over 600 folks right now in the program, which is just amazing. I just want to thank you all for everything that you're doing to connect folks to care and to bring people to recovery.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for that. And so I think that's it, but we always have a very, very important question that we ask every guest before we close, and we're about to close. But it's a very, very important. It's probably one of the most important questions that we ask all day. And so what it is we'll start with Ms. Goldsby. Sarah, what does Sarah do when she's not doing DAODAS? When she's not doing any of what you're doing right now? What are you doing in your free time? What does Sarah like to do to wind down from work?
Well, I just had a baby last year, so right now it's full time with a toddler. But it's been a life transition and a wonderful one. I know folks out there who are parents know the miracle of parenthood, and so we're in the thick of it right now.
Wow. Well, that's a nice getaway. Anytime you go home to that cuddly little precious thing, that's always a getaway. And that's, to me, that's vacation every single day. My youngest is 18 right now, and so he's in college, but I do have grands, and that's my passion. That's my getaway. I can fall into their arms and look in those faces, and I can get lost for days. So I understand where you are. Major O'Neill, what do you do when you're not fighting crime?
Well, I hunt some. I hunt with my son a lot. I got 2 grandchildren now. One's 3, just turned 3, and one's 8. So they pulled me out of retirement. I used to coach, and I coach my 8-year-old granddaughter now in soccer, and I coached her mother. So I'm going through another generation. I don't know if my knees will be able to see this to the end because I probably played myself too long. But I actually came home yesterday afternoon a little bit early because I did not get a lot of sleep the night before. And my grandson was there. And I told my wife, who was off, she was going to go get my granddaughter. I said, I'll watch the grandson. Well, I tried to take a little nap, and he sat up on my lap and told me that, Granddaddy, when you come here, you can't rest. You can't take naps. You're going to have to do better. And so that's my 3-year-old. So I realized I probably should have if I was going to take a nap, I probably should have let him go with her to pick his sister up. But otherwise, he made me feel a bit bad about being tired, and that wasn't going to happen again. So.
But ain't that amazing that those little individuals, they control you? It's like you become a puppet.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I love it. Get ready, Sarah. Get ready for it. It's coming. So before we close, if anybody want to get in touch with South Carolina DAODAS or want to get in touch with South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, could y'all give us some contact information just in case you want to reach out and ask any questions or want to get any information off of your websites?
Sure. So I first want to encourage everyone who wants more information on the topic we discussed today to visit justplainkillers.com. And that's our state's website that has a lot of data, a lot of county-specific information related to the Narcan or Naloxone we talked about, information about reversing overdose, and then information about the prescription drugs that we need to be aware of. So a lot of information there. I also just want to say for anybody, I see the phone number to CareSouth going across the screen down below, but anybody who wants to call our 1-800 number related to mental health or substance use issues, because of the COVID-19, this 1-844-SC-HOPES is a phone number to call. Anyone in the state can call that number and be connected with a licensed healthcare professional, licensed mental health professional, or licensed addiction counselor to really talk more about mental health and substance issues. And then anyone who wants to contact DAODAS, daodas.sc.gov, and just invite comments and questions there.
Thank you. Major O'Neill?
You can call me at any time. Just call SLED, ask for me. I'll be glad to help anybody with any questions. Speak. I speak about this marijuana legalization. I speak about the opioid problem. And I have a captain that will do the same, and some lieutenants. So if you need anybody to come speak to you about what we're seeing, the dangers, legislation that is very dangerous for our young people in our state, please give us a call, and we'll be glad to help you with that.
All right. Go ahead.
One more thing. I'm sorry, we just keep going, but this is really important. And I just want to say, we've got hundreds of thousands of South Carolinians who have recovered from substance use disorder. They're everywhere, and we want to keep celebrating them and giving everybody the hope and the message that recovery is possible. And so just visiting embracerecoverysc.com will give you more information on the miracle of recovery.
All right. So we hope everybody that's watching has gotten this information and that you use these resources to better educate yourself, educate your family members and your community members about the dangers that we're facing in our streets with counterfeit drugs and everything else. And we hope that you've really taken this in, not just listen to it, but you're going to apply some of this to your life, and that together we can work to save many, many more lives and bring together many more families through treatment and recovery. If you want to know anything about Care South Carolina, the services that we offer, anything that we do, you can reach us at our website at www.caresouthcarolina.com. And you can also call us at 1-866-498-0399. If you want to know anything about MAT services, you can call me directly at 843-624-1891. And I'm Daniel Myers, and I'd be more than glad to talk to you anytime and set you with the proper resources to get you into treatment. So it's been wonderful. And I am so happy that we have had you guys on today. And this made my weekend. I'm happy. So
yes, it has.
We're going to turn everything over to Marek and let him close us out.
Absolutely, yeah. Again, thank you both for being here. This was a wonderful discussion. Way to close out some of our shows as we close out the year with some good information, especially going into the holiday season. Some things to look out for, some good information to have conversations over Thanksgiving dinner, the holidays and everything. So thank you both for participating again. They gave their information. If you need them, reach out to them. And we look forward to having them. They are now officially special guests and family of the CareSouth Carolina Community Live podcast. Right. So we're going to look forward to have them back as guests later in the year, maybe somewhere around later in the first of the year, 2022, to kind of give us an update. Thank you again. And again, this is the CareSouth Carolina Community Live podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.